Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror, the same one you've stood in front of 1,000 times morning after morning, brushing your teeth, combing your hair, checking for signs of aging. But today, something's different. The eyes staring back at you aren't quite yours. There's a subtle shift, a hardness, a coldness in the stare. It's not rage or cruelty that unnerves you. It's indifference. Now imagine this face-your-face years from now, speaking calmly while doing something unthinkable, not in the heat of passion, not because you lost control, but precisely because you felt entirely justified. Maybe it's ending a relationship in a way that shatters someone. Maybe it's standing by while someone suffers. Maybe it's joining a system that crushes lives while you sign the forms. You tell yourself, I'm a good person. I would never. But what if that's exactly what everyone tells themselves right before they aren't? What if the road from virtue to monstrosity isn't marked by obvious signposts, but paved with good intentions, righteous beliefs, and a quiet, slow death of self-awareness? What if the transformation happens not through some dramatic fall, but through small, invisible shifts, each one justifiable, each one so normal? Ask yourself, when was the last time you looked at someone you disagreed with and genuinely tried to understand their soul, not just prove them wrong? When was the last time you chose curiosity over judgment? Or more disturbingly, when was the last time you enjoyed someone else's downfall, even silently, because it made you feel superior, vindicated, or safe? We are conditioned to believe that monsters come with fangs, uniforms, weapons, obvious signs of malevolence. But history, psychology, and literature all tell a different story. Monsters, more often than not, come wearing smiles, soft-spoken, well-dressed, loved by many, certain of their morality. They come with diplomas on the wall, charity in their calendars, and kindness in their voice, until something shifts. And then, they become capable of things they swore they'd never do. Why is it that some of the most horrific atrocities in human history were carried out by people who were just following orders? Why do we find the most disturbing behaviors not among villains in the dark, but in the hearts of people who once loved, who once believed in justice, who once cared deeply? Could it be that there's something within us, within you, that you've refused to look at? Something waiting, quietly, in the shadow of your psyche. Something not evil, but forgotten, repressed, ignored, and because of that, it begins to grow, distorted. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. And when left unseen, the shadow doesn't just disappear. It acts, often without our conscious permission. It hides in our righteousness, our loyalty, our need to be good. You might think, but I know myself. I would never do those things. But here's the paradox. The more certain you are of your goodness, the less likely you are to question your motives. And in that blind spot, the seed of cruelty takes root, not because you're evil, but because you stopped examining yourself. Consider this. What if the path to becoming a monster begins not with hatred, but with certainty? What if it begins with the quiet, subtle idea that I'm on the right side and they are not? That my pain is valid, but theirs is weak. That my anger is righteous, but theirs is dangerous. It's not always violence that makes a person monstrous. Sometimes it's the absence of empathy, the slow erosion of moral imagination, the refusal to see the humanity in the other. And perhaps most terrifying of all, what if being a good person isn't enough to protect you from the transformation? Not if the conditions are right, not if the story is convincing, not if the system rewards you for turning away. Because when comfort and convenience ask you to stay silent, when fear tells you to conform, when bitterness dresses itself as truth, what choice will you make? Will you even know you're making one? And so we arrive at the great question, what turns a good person into a monster? Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but actually, psychologically, philosophically, historically. The answer is far more unsettling than you've been led to believe. Because it doesn't begin with them. It begins with you. And now we must go deeper to uncover the hidden psychological and philosophical roots behind this transformation. So what truly lurks beneath this transformation? It's not an evil gene, not some rare moral failure. The truth is far more ordinary and more terrifying for that very reason. The descent into monstrosity begins not with hatred, but with denial. Not with cruelty, but with disconnection. It is the absence of awareness, not the presence of malice, that marks the true beginning. Carl Jung warned us long ago. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. He understood that the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge the shadow do not vanish. They wait. They fester. And in time, they emerge, disguised. You want to be good. That's noble. But in our attempt to be good, we often deny the parts of ourselves that are jealous, petty, cruel, vindictive. We push them down. We hide them beneath personas masks we wear to be liked, to be accepted, to be seen as moral. But here's the danger. What we repress does not dissolve. It distorts. In time, that buried rage, that hidden resentment, that unspoken fear, it demands expression. But now, because we've labeled those feelings as not me, they surface through projection. We see in others what we cannot bear to see in ourselves. You see, the monster isn't created by the darkness. The monster is created by pretending the darkness isn't there. Friedrich Nietzsche explored this with savage clarity. Beware that, when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. For when you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. The moment you take up arms against what you consider evil, there is a subtle shift. You begin to believe that anything done in the name of your cause is justified, that your anger is clean, that your condemnation is divine. And so you lie to yourself. You say you're protecting, when really you're punishing. You say you're standing for justice, when really you're craving revenge. You say you're defending peace, when truly you just want to silence the dissonance. Jean-Paul Sartre understood this moral disintegration not as a sudden betrayal, but a gradual abandonment of freedom. He believed that people fall into bad faith, a self-deception where they surrender responsibility, pretending to be just a role, a cog, a victim of the system. And in doing so, they absolve themselves of the burden of choice. That's how good people rationalize monstrosity. I had no choice. It's just how things are. They brought it upon themselves. I'm doing this for the greater good. And so we must ask, what is it we're truly avoiding? The answer is deeply uncomfortable. We're avoiding the truth of our own potential, the potential for both creation and destruction, for love and cruelty, for light and shadow. Arthur Schopenhauer, that great pessimist, saw in humanity a will not rational, not moral but blind, endless, and often selfish. We pursue our desires not because they are noble, but because we are driven by unseen forces, urges, compulsions we do not understand. He believed that suffering emerges from this insatiable will and that our so-called goodness often masks deeper instincts for control and dominance. Modern psychology agrees. People aren't as rational as they think. We are, in large part, creatures of emotion, habits, and unconscious drives. In the famous Milgram experiment, ordinary participants, most of them polite, non-violent people, administered what they believed were fatal electric shocks to strangers simply because an authority figure told them to. They didn't wake up as monsters. They didn't feel hatred. They simply obeyed. This is the horror. Evil does not require malice. It requires obedience. It requires denial. It requires self-deception. Gabor Mate, exploring trauma and addiction, reminds us that when a person is disconnected from their authentic self, when survival demands suppression of their truth, they become vulnerable to whatever role society expects of them. That role might be hero, patriot, model citizen, but beneath it, a fractured self, full of unmet needs and unhealed pain, drives their actions. And when that pain is never confronted, it finds expression through domination, control, or cruelty. So let's trace this step by step. A child grows up being told that anger is bad. They repress their anger to be good. That repressed anger turns into resentment. That resentment becomes projection, seeing others as the enemy. Eventually, they dehumanize those who trigger them. Now, their aggression feels not only justified, it feels necessary. The monster, then, is not a freak accident. It is the byproduct of fragmentation of a person divided against themselves. Aldous Huxley foresaw a society where this fragmentation was not only tolerated, but institutionalized, where people would no longer need to be beaten into submission, they would be entertained into apathy, disconnected into compliance, trained to accept their masks as their true faces. And that's what makes this transformation so subtle. You don't need to do something horrific to lose yourself. You simply need to stop asking why. You simply need to forget that you have a shadow. You simply need to become comfortable. Comfort is the death of examination. And when people stop examining themselves, they begin to mistake their roles for their souls. They become parents, employees, citizens, believers. They do what's expected. They stop questioning. And slowly, they forget how to see the humanity in others because they've forgotten how to see the humanity in themselves. And when that happens, cruelty is no longer something to recoil from. It becomes normalized, rationalized, sanitized. And the most frightening part? You still think you're good. But something has changed. Something deep, something hidden. And unless it is brought into the light, the transformation continues. By now, the transformation is underway, but no one sees it. Not your friends, not your family, not even you. You still smile at strangers. You still post quotes about kindness. You still go to work, pay your bills, play your roles. But something beneath the surface has shifted. Something vital has been buried under layers of performance, ideology, and self-preservation. The monster does not roar. It whispers. It hides behind routines, behind groupthink, behind the soothing lie that everyone else is doing it. It creeps into your choices, not with violence, but with quiet convenience. It infiltrates your language first. You begin to use words that dehumanize but casually. You refer to people as them, idiots, sheep, monsters, garbage. You do it without malice, maybe even with humor. But each word chips away at the bridge between you and the other. This isn't just semantics. Words shape thought. Thought shapes perception. And perception becomes action. So what happens when your words begin to kill the humanity in others before any action ever does? The psychologist Albert Bandura called it moral disengagement, a process where individuals convince themselves that ethical standards don't apply in a certain context. Soldiers call it collateral damage. Corporations call it restructuring. Entire nations call it security. You tell yourself, I didn't mean harm. I was just doing my job, just stating facts, just following orders. But underneath each just is a severed connection, a refusal to feel, a choice to turn away. And the consequences? They are not just out there in the world, they are in you. Every time you suppress a moral impulse, a part of you goes silent. Every time you witness suffering and justify it, something within you shrinks. Every time you punish others for making you uncomfortable, you reinforce your own cage, till one day you stop feeling entirely. You no longer notice that your empathy has narrowed, that your beliefs have hardened, that your world has become a mirror place where everyone must look and think and act like you in order to be seen as human. You have not become a villain in the traditional sense. You have become something more common, more insidious. You've become numb. And numbness is the ideal soil for cruelty. Because when you no longer feel deeply, when the pain of others becomes abstract, when compassion becomes conditional, then anything is permissible. And it doesn't look like evil. It looks like efficiency. It looks like progress. It looks like doing what's best. But beneath those phrases lies a moral corpse. Let's go deeper still. Your mind is not a fortress. It is a fluid ecosystem, constantly shaped by culture, repetition, and exposure. Cognitive biases, those hidden glitches in the brain, make it easy to walk the path of unconscious cruelty. The confirmation bias ensures you only see what aligns with what you already believe. The fundamental attribution error makes you excuse your own flaws as circumstantial, but judge others as defective. The authority bias leads you to obey figures in power, even against your better judgment. And so, you slowly become incapable of seeing clearly. You surround yourself with media, conversations, and institutions that reinforce your worldview. You build a mental echo chamber, and in that chamber, dissent becomes threat. Nuance becomes betrayal. You become part of a machine that punishes thought and rewards conformity. You laugh at cruelty if the target is deserving. You share outrage, but never reflection. You speak justice, but live in fear. And fear is the architect of monstrosity. Fear makes you choose safety over integrity. Fear makes you silent when truth demands a voice. Fear makes you obedient not to morality, but to comfort, to belonging, to image. But here's the most devastating part. You still believe you are a good person, because the monster doesn't announce its presence. It moves through bureaucracy, through silence, through the soothing logic of, I'm just doing what needs to be done. And society is designed to protect this illusion. Institutions rarely reward moral courage. They reward compliance. They elevate those who fit in, who don't ask questions, who keep their heads down. They teach you that goodness is following the rules, not questioning them. They say, stay in your lane. They say, don't make it political. They say, don't be difficult. And so, you begin to amputate the parts of yourself that are inconvenient, the part that speaks truth, the part that feels too much, the part that remembers suffering your own and others. And then, when something horrific happens, when injustice is served cold, when suffering is ignored, you shake your head in disbelief. How could this happen? Who would allow this? You allowed it. With your silence, with your denial, with your refusal to confront your own capacity for darkness. Because you were too busy proving that you were good to realize that being good isn't enough. Not if it means being blind. But what if you could wake up? What if the numbness could be undone? What if there's a rebellion waiting not against others, but within yourself? Because only when you face your own darkness can you stop projecting it onto the world. Only when you confront the monster in the mirror can you choose not to become it. Let's be honest. By now, something inside you might feel disturbed, maybe even unsettled. Good. That's where freedom begins, not in certainty, not in comfort, but in discomfort that refuses to let you look away. Because the greatest rebellion doesn't begin with fire in the streets. It begins with fire in the soul. A spark of awareness that says, I won't live asleep anymore. So the question becomes, how do you break free from a transformation you didn't even realize was happening? First, you stop trying to be a good person. And instead, you start becoming a whole person. That means you stop pretending your rage doesn't exist. You stop acting like your envy, your fear, your bitterness, your shame aren't part of you. You stop feeding the illusion that only positive emotions are real or acceptable. Carl Jung called this the integration of the shadow. He believed that enlightenment is not about imagining figures of light, but about making the darkness conscious. That your real power isn't in denying your darkness, but in owning it and choosing what to do with it. This is where the rebellion begins, not with moral posturing, but with radical self-honesty. Not with judgment, but with integration. Not with virtue signaling, but with the guts to ask, what am I hiding from myself? It takes courage to see your inner tyrant, to see the part of you that wants control, to see the part of you that secretly delights in superiority or wishes others would fail, to see the part that lies, manipulates, or rationalizes. But when you Daoin, you face that shadow, without flinching, something paradoxical happens. You stop being controlled by it. Because now it's not in the dark. Now it has a name. Now you are the one choosing. This is not about self-flagellation. This is not about wallowing in guilt. It's about becoming dangerous and disciplined, powerful and responsible. It's about holding both the sword and the restraint to sheath it. This isn't just psychological, it's philosophical. Nietzsche, often misread as nihilistic, actually believed in transformation through struggle. He spoke of the Übermensch, one who creates their own values, who transcends herd morality, who dares to face the abyss and emerge not broken, but redefined. He didn't mean this arrogantly. He meant it as a sacred challenge. Can you live beyond borrowed ethics? Can you define yourself not through obedience, but through conscious evolution? That's the rebellion, not against society, against your own conditioning, against the parts of you that just want to be liked, that want to conform, that want to be praised more than they want to be free. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, warned us of a society where people would come to love their servitude, where freedom would be traded for pleasure and depth for distraction. His characters weren't tortured, they were entertained. They weren't oppressed, they were pacified. And this is exactly how modern monstrosity is manufactured today. Not through jackboots and camps, but through apathy, through algorithms, through dopamine-fueled consumption, through the slow death of critical thought. So how do you rebel in a world that wants you comfortable, distracted, and agreeable? You begin by feeling again. The grief, the confusion, the raw intensity of a soul that's been silenced too long. You let yourself break down if you need to, because breakdown is often the first sign of breakthrough. You refuse to shrink your emotions into emojis. You refuse to trade introspection for Instagram. You ask dangerous questions like, who told me I had to be this way? What beliefs have I never questioned? What would happen if I stopped lying to myself? You read the books no one's talking about. You sit in silence when everyone else is screaming. You listen to the voice inside that says, there's more to life than performance. And most importantly, you stop outsourcing your morality. You stop waiting for leaders, for institutions, for gurus, for movements to tell you what's right. You develop discernment, a moral compass forged in solitude, sharpened by self-examination, and guided by truth, not ideology. This doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean arrogance. It means autonomy. It means refusing to become a puppet even if the strings are invisible. It means resisting not only injustice in the world, but injustice in your own mind. Do you remember the Milgram experiment? Where ordinary people electrocuted strangers because a man in a lab coat told them to. Here's the twist. You don't need a lab coat. You just need culture. Just need a little peer pressure. A little fear of standing out. A little story about how things are. But what happens when you become the person who doesn't press the button? Who steps out of the line? Who asks why, even when it costs you comfort? You become dangerous. But in the most sacred way. You become someone who can't be bought, can't be programmed, can't be turned into a monster, because you've already met yours and made peace. This is rebellion, and it's not theoretical, it's deeply practical. It means setting boundaries even when it makes you look selfish. It means telling the truth even when it makes you unpopular. It means choosing depth over approval and integrity over convenience. It means building a life so rooted in awareness that even if you stumble, you know it, and you return to center. And slowly, something shifts. You're not numb anymore. You feel things. You see people not as threats, not as labels, but as fractured, complex, and beautiful. You speak not to impress, but to connect. You live not to perform, but to evolve. The rebellion is not loud. It's not trending. It's not even visible to most. But you'll know you're part of it when you stop asking, what will they think of me? And start asking, what does this world need from someone awake? You've made it this far. You've walked through the shadows. You've faced the lie that goodness protects you from monstrosity. You've tasted the bitter truth that numbness, obedience, and denial breed more horror than hatred ever could. But now, something deeper remains. Not just a question of how people become monsters, but a far more unsettling one. What if the monster was never separate from you? You were told your whole life to be good, to smile, to behave, to stay in line, to keep your voice soft and your opinions softer, to never make others uncomfortable, even if it meant abandoning your own truth. And so, piece by piece, you began to amputate your authenticity. You chopped off your anger and called it politeness. You buried your grief and called it resilience. You numbed your desires and called it maturity. You became good but not whole, polished but not real. Here is the ultimate, most terrifying truth. It was never your darkness that was dangerous. It was your repression of it, your unwillingness to integrate it. The monster is not what you feel. It's what you refuse to feel. Not what you acknowledge, but what you suppress, deny, ignore. You don't become monstrous by embracing your anger. You become monstrous by pretending you don't have any. You don't become dangerous by questioning authority. You become dangerous by blindly following it. You don't destroy yourself by feeling too much. You destroy yourself by feeling nothing. And the world doesn't need more good people. It needs whole people. People who have met their inner violence and chosen peace. Who've known what it is to hate and still chosen to love. Who've been tempted by control and still chosen freedom. The real hero's journey is not one of innocence. It's one of integration. It's standing in the ruins of your illusions and asking, who am I now without the mask? And the answer is never clean. It's never easy. It's never pretty. But it is real. The final, most powerful realization is this. You have always had the capacity to be both tyrant and liberator. To harm or to heal. To numb or to awaken. And every single day, you choose. Not once, but in every interaction, every reaction, every silence, every word. Do you feed your shadow by denying it? Or do you shine light on it and say, you are part of me, and I will not let you rule me? This is the paradox that will either break you or free you. You can't become truly good until you realize you're not. Not all the time, not automatically, not without effort. Real goodness is a discipline. It's not passive, it's active. It's not moral posturing, it's self-confrontation. It's not about being seen as kind, it's about being willing to be misunderstood for the sake of truth. It's not easy, but it's true. And in that truth, something opens. A space, a silence, a moment of freedom so pure, it feels like grace. You don't have to keep performing anymore. You don't have to keep pretending you're above it all. You don't have to keep proving you're good, because now you're real. You've seen the part of yourself capable of harm and you've chosen not to feed it. You've faced the temptation to belong by betraying your values and you've chosen solitude over self-betrayal. You've understood that monsters are not born. They are made through 1,000 small choices to look away. And you are no longer looking away. You are not above the darkness. But now, you are not afraid of it. You walk with it, name it, integrate it, and in doing so, you transcend it. Because the opposite of evil is not goodness. It is awareness. It is presence. It is the ability to see clearly, feel deeply, and choose consciously. So here, in the final stretch of this descent and ascent, you face the only question that truly matters. Now that you know what you are capable of, what will you choose to become? This is your life. This is your war, not against others, but against the deadening of your own soul. Be kind, be fierce, be honest, be awake, because the world doesn't need more saints. It needs warriors of awareness, people who've walked through their own hell and come back carrying light not in spite of the fire, but because of it. The real monster is not the one who rages. It's the one who sleeps. So wake up now